I would like to call to order the June 20th, 2017 Board of Directors meeting of the Des Moines Public Schools. Please take the roll.
Ms. Bozen? Here. Natasha Newcomb?
Here.
Ms. Langford?
Here.
Ms. Caldwell-Johnson?
Here.
Ms. Ellsburn?
Here.
Ms. Anderson?
Here.
And Mr. Barron is absent.
The first item tonight is approval of the agenda, and I'd like to note that the consent item number 16, Board Report Schedule for 2017-18, will be removed from consent this evening and placed on the July 11th meeting agenda. So again, tonight, approval of the agenda will exclude item number 16, which will be placed on a subsequent meeting agenda. Are there any requests for pulling any other items from consent? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion and a second to approve the agenda absent item number 16.
Move approval. Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve tonight's agenda. Please vote. Motion carries 6-0. The next item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes. May I have a motion and a second to approve the June 6, 2017 meeting minutes?
Move approval.
We have a motion and a second to approve the June 6, 2017 meeting minutes. Any discussion or corrections? Hearing none, please vote. Oh, yeah, that's right. I will abstain. I was not at the meeting. Thank you. Motion passes 5 with 1 abstention. The next item on our agenda is the consent items. We allow any person the opportunity to speak to the board for 5 minutes following the presentation of an agenda item. If anyone wishes to speak to an agenda item, please go to the information table to sign up. Remarks must be germane to the agenda, and we ask that you avoid references to personalities and character attacks, as those types of comments serve no productive purpose. As a reminder to the board and public, the board will not engage in discussion or deliberation with the speaker regarding comments made to agenda items. Discussion and deliberation will remain among the board members at the board table, with speakers' comments informing said discussion, deliberation, and determination as deemed necessary. We appreciate your input. Ms. Newcomb, Natasha, I believe that you have the motion.
Thank you. I move that the board approve the consent items in accordance with the recommended action for each item on the consent agenda, including bills previously authorized, certified, and approved for payment by the board secretary in the amount of $5,344,507.96.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to approve this evening's consent items. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, please vote. Pushing the wrong thing. Item passes 6-0. The next item on our agenda is item number D1, open enrollment late applications for denial. Superintendent Ahart, would you please introduce the matter?
Yes, item D1 is the recommendation of the administration on the denial of late applications for open enrollment. This is the busy time of year for that, as the board may recall from previous years.
I would entertain a motion and a second to deny the late applications for open enrollment. We have a motion and a second to deny the late applications for open enrollment. I don't believe we have any speakers on this item. Are there any comments or questions from the board? We have a motion and a second on the table to deny the late applications. Please vote. Motion carries 6-0. The next item on our agenda is item number D2, open enrollment appeals for denial. Superintendent, would you please introduce this item?
Yes, part of the open enrollment process as articulated by the state. Timely open enrollment applications that have been denied may be appealed for a number of cause items, and what you have on your agenda are the administration's recommendations on those that we've decided to deny.
Thank you. May I have a motion and a second to deny the open enrollment appeals?
Move approval.
We have a motion and a second to deny the open enrollment appeals, and we have one speaker, Megan Howell. Please approach the podium and provide your name and address for the record. Thanks for being here.
Hey, my name is Megan Howell. My address is 1980 Regency Drive, Des Moines, Iowa. And I had sent in my letter of appeal back in April 28th. Just want to remind you guys about why I am appealing your denial. My daughter Amanda has had started Des Moines Public Schools in 3rd grade. She is currently getting ready to attend 8th grade. She has developed social anxiety along with my other daughter. And so it has been tough to get her to go to school, to focus, to get assignments done, due to the fact that when we moved to Des Moines, we came from a smaller town, there's more kids when she got into the middle school level. So that therefore she does not get a focus, does not get her homework done, gets her grades lowered, she does not want to get up and go to school. So we have had issues with that. I have been in different meetings about her absences, to where we've done everything we could do for that, to where we decided that the best option would be to try and do homeschooling through the home instruction here at Des Moines Public Schools. What we have found out with that is it does not work for me and my child. I had also applied for open enrollment to the K-12 program through Clayton Ridge for both of my daughters 3 years ago, and we were denied at that point too. At that time, my daughter who's with me today, we went to the home instruction to where we did the one to where we did not have to, we didn't have to come to anybody, the state, the school, nothing. We were just on our own. That led us to, when she turned 16, she was done. She should have graduated last month in May. And now she is working in fast food restaurants because she was not able to continue due to her anxiety. What we have found out for this year with my youngest daughter is we have had the home instruction teacher come in and help me set up a plan, which is great. I'm happy to have that help. However, when we do get a plan going and it's time for me to to sit down with my child and go and try to do the studies with her, I have also have really bad anxiety. I don't know if you can tell how bad I'm shaking. I have very bad anxiety, very bad depression for many years, to where I don't know what I'm supposed to do. So my anxiety flares up and I have to step back away from it. What then happens is my depression kicks in and I feel like that I have failed my child. I feel like I have failed my oldest child as well. This is just something that my husband and I feel that would be the best thing for my child to get her to complete her high school education, is to be able to do the K-12 program through Iowa Virtual Academy, which would take us to Clayton Ridge School District. She would have that one-on-one with teachers. She wouldn't have to worry about other students, wouldn't have to worry about her anxiety coming up, and she would be able to understand everything and keep her grades up. If it comes to where you guys do not change your minds and continue to deny our appeal, it will end up having, for us to feel that is important for our child, the fact that I will have to move her to a different school district where her and I will move into with my parents to where she can go through the Urbandale School District and get the open enrollment there, which will leave then us leaving home and my husband staying back at home, which is also her father, and it would split up our family. So I am trying to do what is best for my child, and I'm asking you guys to please also do what is best for my child, because this is what us as her parents feel this is what she needs. And I had also sent in a letter from my therapist to show you guys how long I have been having the anxiety and depression, that it's not just made up. I don't know if you guys had received that or not, but I have a copy here if you guys need it. So I thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here this evening. We have a motion and a second to deny the appeals. Any further discussion?
Yeah.
Yes.
I just had a couple of comments here. I guess based on this, you can see the list. So the very first case number, that one I will be voting no on this because I felt they met that burden for an exception, as well as the 1936376-288. I guess part of that explanation for the denial kind of was a little not as solid as I would have hoped. So again, for that reason, those two reasons, I will be voting this no.
Any further discussion from the board? Hearing none, we do have a motion and a second on the table to deny the appeals. Please vote. Motion carries 4-2. The next item on our agenda is agenda item number D3, monitoring report for Algebra 1, Part 3. I'd invite the staff to come forward and ask the superintendent to please introduce the item.
Yeah, so last summer, the board had identified 4 priority goal areas, and we've had a series of reports in 4 different areas: in pre-K, elementary reading, males of color, and algebra. This is the final of the algebra reports. I will turn it over to Noelle and Christy.
All right, good evening, board. My name is Noelle Tickey. I'm Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, and to my right is Christy Donald, our Mathematics Coordinator for Secondary Schools. So as Dr. Ahart mentioned, this is part 3 of a 3-part series. So the data that we're about to review will actually reflect fall to spring measurement. And so I want to take a minute to just review the KPIs because we're still kind of grappling with what the data represents. And so I'm going to do my best to help communicate to you all when we look at map data, how is that different than maybe previous data that we've looked at, and how can we start to interpret the various measures. So the first KPI that we'll be looking at is the percent of 8th and 9th grade students at or above the MAP College and Career Readiness benchmark. And so this is what we might equate to mastery. The MAP assessment measures the Common Core state standards, which finally we have an assessment that aligns to what it is we're teaching in our classroom. So that's certainly progress. But also it's important to keep in mind that when we look at the percent of students actually meeting that benchmark that's on track for college and career readiness, that's actually a very high benchmark because it's correlated to the Smarter Balanced cut point. So it is what it is. It's a consistent measure, and it certainly tells us from year to year and from measurement to measurement if we're improving. The second one we're looking at is the percent of 8th and 9th grade students meeting or exceeding the fall to spring MAP projected growth targets. So when we look at the percent meeting growth targets, this is really looking at individual students based on where they test in the fall. the assessment will actually kind of norm them and say, since you fell in this RIT range, here is your projected growth as an individual student based on national norms. So every student has a personalized growth target. So what this KPI is looking at is the percent of students who actually met that expected or typical growth target. So in this case, we would be looking at 100% would be our goal of students meeting their personalized growth target. The next one is looking at the percent of fall to spring projected growth met. This is a little bit different of a look in that we're seeing how close we are to that goal being met. So if I were to give you an analogy, the percent of students meeting projected growth targets, if this is like, if we were to compare it to like a weight loss goal, for example, we might say that this is like having a personalized weight loss goal, and half of us reach our goal. So if the national norm is at 50%, we're doing better than average if we exceed that 50%. We really celebrate when we start getting into the 60s and 70s because that's how we know that we're really closing gaps. So when we look at the percent of projected growth met, that's looking at if I have a weight loss goal, let's say of 30 pounds, and I meet it, I've met 100% of my weight loss goal. If I lose 20 pounds, then I have met 60% of my goal, and so on. In some cases, we want to see students surpass their goal. So in this analogy, if I surpass my goal and lose 35 pounds, for example, I have met 117% of my goal. So we're really looking at 3 different measures all in the same assessment, one being that college readiness, how many are getting to mastery and kind of crossing that line for on track, the percent meeting their goal, and then that third one, the percent of the goal met. Is that confusing enough for you?
Pretty much.
We'll continue to work through the data points as we work through this, and hopefully it'll become clearer.
Another reason that this is a little difficult to look at this year is it's the first year, and so we don't have a trend to look at,
Right.
which sometimes helps frame it a little bit differently too. But we will continue to try to educate both the board and our community about how to make sense of this new assessment. I would also mention too, really the only valid measure that we've had previous to the map in terms of measuring college and career readiness has been the ACT, which is of course only taken by our juniors. And so having this information dialed back to the elementary level is very useful. And just as with every district across the country, when they've adopted either the Smarter Balanced or the other big big assessment that's aligned to the Common Core, the first time, or Park, yeah, the first couple of times through, it was a very dramatic adjustment because scores came out much lower than what they looked like on the state test, which was less rigorous and which had much less rigorous cut points to determine proficiency.
So looking at our first data point, the percent of 8th and 9th grade students at or above the college and career readiness, this would be essentially looking at mastery of standards. So that's how many students are crossing the line, essentially, as we look at the Smarter Balance correlation. So in this data set, we're looking at an increase of about 2.37%. Looking from fall to spring. Again, when we have multi-year trend data, that will give us even more information to know from year to year how our students are doing. The most significant gains were seen in our Asian population as well as our white population. This next table is the same look at college and career readiness, how many students are kind of crossing that line and getting to mastery. And this is looking at our 9th grade students. So obviously we have a lot of concern with the data that we're seeing here, particularly in our 9th grade. And we did see a decrease from fall to spring, a negligible decrease of 0.39.
Would you also just talk about how the benchmarks progress too? It's not the same benchmark
Correct.
fall, winter, and spring.
So when we talk about crossing the line, know that that line changes depending on the year that you're the time of year that you're taking that assessment. So are they crossing the line in the fall, and then it goes up? Are they crossing the line in the winter, and then it goes up again? Are they crossing the line in the spring? So it's a moving target, but it's very much based on those cut points for the appropriate time of year.
So for what growth it should be measured? You know, if
Correct,
you're
for
in the
time of
current
year.
What is the growth you should
Yep,
be
for
at
your
or where
grade
you're at?
level,
Okay.
time of year, here's what we would expect you to master.
Nicole, will you remind us at what month of the year the tests are administered, fall, winter, spring?
Yep.
and-
So we'll take it in September, October for fall. Winter starts right before break and usually goes through January. So it's truly a kind of a mid-year dipstick. And then spring is April, May.
Thank you.
Do you think that it's a new test, right? It's newer?
Correct.
I mean, that probably has something to do with the scores. And do you think that maybe some of them aren't taking it seriously?
We absolutely know that's the case in
Because
high
I have
school.
teenagers, so.
Yep, we know that's the case in high school. We've taken some steps with our school leaders in communicating the importance of this. I think that will take a little bit of time. Frankly, I'm kind of losing my patience using that as an excuse, but I understand that's the reality of teenagers, and so that's something that we're going to continue. Do personalized goal setting with students, making data public, protecting the testing environment, sending a message that this is important.
Right, because I think that some of them have the mindset of like, this doesn't matter, and that
Absolutely.
they're not sitting in your seat right now.
I just,
Right.
I'll ask later.
The other factor is it's an adaptive test. So I think we talked about this in one of the other times of the year, that the students figured out quickly that if you actually miss questions, you're done faster. The more questions you get right, the longer the test takes. And so that's it's just an education thing that we need to communicate with our students and teachers.
Can I just real quickly ask a question? Because if this is aligned to the curriculum, is there any way to make it aligned to their actual scores? So they take it more seriously?
To their grades, you mean?
Yeah,
Yes.
it should be tied, I mean, that's the only way you're gonna really truly, this is part of your grade because we are actually testing the
It is a way for
curriculum.
them to demonstrate their mastery of standards aligned to the class. Yeah, so there is a way to do that.
Okay. It might get a little more serious about it.
Write that down. Yes, absolutely. That's a good idea. Okay, table 3, this looks at our percentage of 8th grade students meeting their projected growth target. So as a reminder, this would be the equivalent of if I have a weight loss goal of 30 pounds and I meet that goal, it's how many of us met our personal goal. So if half of us meet our goal, we're at 50%. So what we want to see is the national average would be at 50%. So then we say, well, what is good? Good is better than 50%. We want to aspire to at least 60, and then a continuous improvement from there. So as you can see, our middle school is in a little bit better shape. We're looking across the board, and all students, we are above that 50%, wanting to get to that 60 as soon as possible. Looking at table 4, this is the percent of 9th grade students, that same look at data of what percent of our students actually met their growth goal, and we're under 50% at about 44.5%. Again, we want to see at least to 50 and to 60 as soon as possible. Table 5 represents, again, now we're shifting to a new KPI, which is the percent of goal met. So this is if we have a weight loss goal of 30 pounds and we reach 30 pounds, then we met 100% of our goal. So we would want to see as close to 100% or higher is what we want to see. So this is actually good news in our middle schools. We're seeing we're at about 102% of our goal met, so we're exceeding our goal in this case. A celebration is that our African American students outperformed a lot of our other subgroups, so that's certainly an area of celebration for us. Looking at the next one, same data point for ninth grade, not quite as rosy, to be honest, with the ninth grade data. We're looking at our Asian population was right around 78% of the goal met. We want to be at 100, and we're at 37. So we have some significant work to do here, no doubt. Okay, another KPI as we looked at over time is the percent of students earning a C or higher in Algebra 1 by the end of 8th grade. So this is a little bit tricky, and if you were to compare this to previous board reports, you're going to see a different number because we've changed how we've actually pulled the data. So this is actually including all students who have taken it by 8th grade, and then when we look at the 9th grade one, it's all students who have or have not yet taken it. So we'll just focus on 8th grade right now, and we've actually seen an increase. So of the students who are taking Algebra 1 by 8th grade, we've increased by about 3.57%, earning a C or higher, with the greatest gains in our African American and Asian populations. Another celebration for us, Christy's talked about efforts to increase the number of students even accessing Algebra 1 by 8th grade, and we've increased by about 5%. We're sitting at about 20% of our 8th graders are currently taking Algebra 1 ahead of schedule. And so that's a number that will continue to grow, and we'll talk about that in our next steps. Okay, looking at C or higher for 9th grade. The 9th grade students completing Algebra 1 with a C or higher actually decreased by 4.71% from 15-16 to 16-17. When we dug into this further, we noticed an interesting trend, although not surprising, is that among our 9th graders who are chronically absent, which means they have an attendance rate below 90%, 24.5% completed the course with a C or higher. And of the 9th graders who were not chronically absent, that number jumped to 60%. So obviously attendance matters. And this is an important data point for us because as we look at interventions and response to this, it's important to know that we'll continue to target instruction. That's actually a different intervention if kids aren't coming to school. And so we need to know what those root causes are. And this is certainly one that we'll need to dig into further with our schools. So if we look at, because this data also includes students who have not taken Algebra 1 by 9th grade, so students who are actually behind schedule, they're included in the N. And so that tells us that some of the students who would say, well, they're not a C or higher, it's because they haven't even taken it. So if we look at just the students who took it, 63% of the students earned a C or higher, which is up a little bit from 2015. And table 9, this is actually looking at our failure rate, so we want to see these numbers go down. So the percent of 9th graders failing Algebra 1, this is the first time taking, decreased just under a percent, it's percentage points, but our largest subgroup, the largest decrease was in ELL subgroup of 4.3%. So this is certainly a number that we want to keep our eye on. Not just success, but also are we reducing our failure rate? All right, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Christy, and she's going to talk about some actions that have been taken and will be taken, and then we'll open it up for questions.
This year, we've continued to work with a math lead team, a district lead team, working on our action plan for this year. We have created this year a math vision around instruction and beliefs and shared that with staff. And we continue to work with the staff in helping them understand what that vision looks like as it connects with all our work for Schools for Rigor. Our next steps, as we've started, is continuing to create those KITE modules, or those on-demand PD modules for teachers as they look at different concepts in mathematics, strategies for teaching those concepts to our students. What is new since last time we met is we were awarded a math and science partnership grant through the state. This grant is focused on specific strategies to work with African American students and ELL students. It's a partnership with professors from Iowa State and Drake. It's intense professional development for our middle school teachers starting in August. They'll have a week of professional development for a small subgroup, hope to grow it later. And then they'll meet monthly throughout the school year for added professional development as well as feedback in their classroom, and then follow up with another week in June next year. So I'm really excited about the possibilities. The two of our professors that are working with us on this, their areas of specialty and their areas of focus are African American students in mathematics and ELs in mathematics. So we brought the experts to the table to work hand in hand with our teachers to help them grow. This next year will be our last year for the cohort for SRG training. We're bringing on the senior level teachers. So we will be hitting that maximum level cohort, as we will always have new staff that we'll continue to work with in those SRG strategies. Also, we've been continuing to expand our summer programming. Last year, we had 99 students complete summer programming. This year, when we started, we had 185 students registered for summer programming. So I'm very excited about the number of students we had interested in spending their summer working on math and continuing to work to get into that accelerated pathway.
So that should be that many more students accessing Algebra 1 by 8th grade. So the purpose of the summer programming is to get them accelerated through the middle school content so that they can take Algebra 1 early and then open up doors to higher level math in high school.
As we looked at the data and was really digging into it, and we started to see, as Noelle said, some additional dig into absenteeism and the effect also on the grades, we realized that we need to do a further dig into the high school data. As you saw, we were not very pleased with where our high school data is, and we need to understand the root causes of it. So we want to dig in a little further with some additional data. I want to look at the MAP scores a little further, Iowa assessments, do some classroom observations in our high schools to see really what the root cause is. And then we have developed a tiered system of support that we'll put in place where we will tier our high schools and give different levels of support, from everyone getting that common core support to, as they move up to tier 2, they get some additional supports, and then tier 3, the most intense support for next year.
Okay. Questions, discussion?
Questions from the board? Yes, Connie?
I kind of was going to bring it up on the next report, but I'll bring it up now only because you talked about chronic absenteeism. When you look at the scores from 8th grade to 9th grade, we have block schedules in high school. We do not in middle school, right? Do you think it's time to review whether block schedules, if you miss one block and you're chronically absent, you miss how many classes? So could that be a big portion of the high school transition? You know, we're always saying there's a transition. Well, transitioning to block where you only have it once a week or twice a week, and then you miss one, and in math especially, everybody's smiling here.
No,
right?
that's been a very heated internal debate for the last 2 years in trying to determine where, what should the schedule look like to maximize student results. And since we're reporting this year for the first time, instead of average daily attendance, the chronic absenteeism that you referenced, that's another filter that points us to what do we need to do with the schedule to minimize loss when we have that much absenteeism.
So I know that I've been on the board long enough that we didn't have it, and now we have block. And if we feel it's really a detriment, what does it take to go back to the other? Only because that it's such a drop, and it's also the chronic absenteeism. I don't know how, is it by blocks that they're missing, or is it the whole day they're missing? Is it 2 block, big? How does that count?
The way yeah, that's a great question. The way the absenteeism is counted is if you miss a part of a day, like if you miss the first 30 minutes of algebra, first block every day, for instance, those all get added up and count as absence. So you don't have to be gone for a full day to be included 1 day absent. If you miss a portion, 25% of the day, 4 different days, that's a day of absenteeism. So yeah, it could. The absenteeism isn't necessarily 18 days absent from a whole day of school. It could be a whole bunch of days absent from one class.
One class. So that's why I'm just saying, I guess I would,
Well, and that's why with that tiered system of support, our first step needs to be to engage in the problem-solving process and do some observations, talk to schools, talk to leaders, talk to teachers, because we wouldn't want to have a knee-jerk reaction and do something as dramatic as that without knowing this is the issue or this is one of our big issues. It's certainly something that has been discussed at length and studied, and we'll continue to dig in. But we want to do a further deep dive with the schools versus kind of a central office deep dive. We need to hear
So
from our
contact,
leaders. And
right.
yeah,
That has been a hot topic of debate
I've
for
heard it from
2 years running now.
schools, some of the schools too recently. That
absolutely.
they feel that could help, so.
there are other things that we can do to minimize through our MTSS systems. It is possible to have daily contact with our students in math, for example. We just have to get creative with scheduling.
I'm just saying on certain subjects, maybe it's more important than others. I don't.
Sure.
Yeah.
Math would be one of them.
And this, Ms. Newcomb.
Yeah, I kind of agree with Connie, just because, especially with like algebra and just some of your science, if you miss a class, it's like, that could be where you just, you start falling behind, and it's a concept that you need, that it builds on each other, you know that, and I don't know
The other
how
thing
hard it would be, or if you just take, or you test, like you do one school like that, I don't know.
The other thing we're working on is the development through the purchase of our learning management system. We have an opportunity, and we're actually in process, and we'll have them ready for fall, is to develop several online courses so students can engage in just-in-time recovery. It's not ideal. It's not as good as a face-to-face teacher, but it's a resource for teachers to say, if you've missed this, here's a learning opportunity that you can engage in. I can check in with you. It's something better than nothing. And so that's something that we can get more just-in-time recovery versus waiting for a student to fail a course and then retake the entire course.
Yeah, I just know how
Yes.
they struggle if they miss, and
Natasha?
Sure. That struggle is real as a parent. I know my son will be like, I have gym today. And I did get, 1 minute late, it was counted. But I digress. So you're looking at the absenteeism. Is there a possibility to kind of link that with, I know we were kind of tracking like detentions, behavioral, seeing if there's a link and maybe be able to address that holistically?
Absolutely, and I think that's something that we'll probably addressed in the Males of Color report as well. I mean,
Right.
this is a systems response. This is not a math response. I mean, this is something that's much bigger than mathematics. We're just seeing the effects, in math. And so that's where our departments have to work together and make sure that we're targeting the right interventions when we're responding to the data and not just assuming it's always an instructional issue.
Right. I did have another question. For the summer programming, I know we've seen a wonderful increase. Is there a report that will come out later saying how many students completed that?
Yes.
We can have that in the fall report.
They're only halfway through their program right now,
Right.
so, yeah.
Give them time.
How many completed it, right?
Yes.
Ms. Langford?
I want to start with the grant that we got, which is awesome. How long, how many years does that grant run for?
It is through for the next school year, and then we can have an opportunity to reapply. We're also looking at some bigger National Science Foundation grants through partnership with Iowa State as well, and applying through there, so we can bring more resources and expertise to our teachers.
Okay. And you said you're piloting this grant with a small group of teachers. How are they being selected, or what schools are they at? Is there a certain?
It was opened up to the teachers as far as we could only ask for funding for so many teachers to support throughout the year with the PD in the week in the summer and then throughout the school year. And so it was opened up to the teachers for first interest, and we got really the teachers who were interested first wanting to be there, open to all our middle school teachers. So it was a matter of, we have about 25 middle school teachers that have signed up for this summer, for this grant opportunity.
And is every school represented?
I'd have to go back and check. I think most of them are represented.
Okay, and this is for throughout, okay, the district. Okay. Thank you. The second piece really kind of speaks more broadly to conversations I know we've had about monitoring reports before at the table and things that we were looking for as a board in terms of our response to data. I mean, this is a lot of data, right? And you all do a really good job of attempting to break down what this means, but this is what you all eat, breathe, and sleep every day, right? And I know we've had conversations at the board table and as a board about specifically wanting a narrative piece from you as a superintendent around what's your response to the data overall? What are you seeing as trends? What are you seeing as opportunities for growth? What's just your general thoughts and response to kind of give us a framework for how we should be interpreting and looking at this data? And I know that, yeah, and for me, that even for like the public, right, as they're like viewing this is just not, this report, I don't believe, gives a clear indicator, particularly because we have to do so much. I think there was a narrative piece that really kind of explained your response to the data, barriers, trends, that sort of thing. It makes it a little bit more digestible, not just for the public, but for us as a board as well. And I know we've had that conversation as a board about that for our board reports moving forward. And so it was something I was really hoping to see this time.
Yes.
Yeah, and I do recall that conversation. And did we conclude, I mean, like, did we come to a consensus direction in doing that? We did, yeah, and okay. Okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
With our other document that's always coinciding with the slides, I realize it sounds like, if I remember, something more beefy, but that also has additional information that kind of coincides with the slides.
The report
Right.
itself has some narrative.
Yeah, there's information in there too. I don't know.
Anybody else on this side before I go back to Ms. Langford? Tiana?
And the desire for that is not to put anybody on blast. It's to help us understand as, you know, leading this district, what are your thoughts about what we're seeing, right? We have, we see the responses to data. From my perspective, they're great. You know, I'm super excited to see that we're going to continue to expand our summer programming. I'm super excited to see that we got applied for this new grant. And of course, already our multi-tiered systems of supports that we're continuing to do. But this is, you know, I think we can all be on the same page that we're like, there are some victories and then there are lots of places where we can all acknowledge that we have work to do. So understanding across the board, across the district, I know you have created a vision, like a plan or a vision for how we want to look at math instruction moving forward, but across the district, what are some of the broad, what's your interpretation of how we move forward, right? We have slide by slide, this is how much we want to see this move, you know, in each grade group. It's just a little harder to digest. So it helps us, I think, since we do high level work, right, and oversight, understand where we're going. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it helps to contextualize it.
It helps to contextualize the information that we're getting.
Yes, Ms. Bozen.
Part of it is because it's so new too, the whole map testing, but just an overview of what we see in this data both for where we're at today. You know, we still don't have trend yet really, and because it's like, where are we at? Where are we going? And, you know, an overview is what you're looking for more, just so, because it's very difficult.
And not just me, we decided this as a board.
Right. No, I'm not saying, I'm just saying from overall, it's like, where were we? Where are we at now? And where are we going to go in more of a simplified statement, more or less overview of all this information that we have, because it is very difficult when you know, we still haven't got the trend. It's, you know, we're looking at it a whole different way than we've ever looked at things. If you looked at Iowa assessments, it's just what it was. It didn't give you as much information or much detail or really able to dive into things in a much greater way. So it's, because like Deanna said, you guys live and breathe it all the time. So for you're at a much higher level, and it's like, how do we explain to a more not simplified, but a more easily understandable when you're not in schoolese, I think you did a great job of explaining what these charts meant, because they are. It's a little confusing when you're looking at them, when we get them in a board deck, until you understand how some are the flip, some are this way, some relate totally different. So, and I think it's just a matter of seeing these two, but if there's an overview statement is what you're at, you know, I think what we asked.
Yes.
So overview in the sense of their interpretation,
Right.
which is what, yeah. Is that right?
Anybody else? So I just have a couple of comments. I agree that having a bit greater illumination of what this means would be helpful. But I'm going to go back to the two things that I think sort of rang true around where I think we have opportunities to think things through a little differently, and that's around the fidelity to the testing and how we increase the students' understanding of the importance of that, sort of given the fact that this is sort of how we measure progress or lack thereof, and then also the impact of absenteeism on what we're seeing. So I think if there's a place where we could sort of reconcile those two pieces as it relates to what we see, that might really help us to better understand whether or not there are some course corrections, other things that need to be done to really help us to maybe be at a different place as we're evaluating next year's data across the 3 testing cycles. So I think the thing that's really helpful here, though, is we do have 3 sort of touch points across the year to be able to determine whether or not there are things that we could be doing throughout the year to better monitor what's happening with students. But I think the lack of data over multiple years obviously puts us at a bit of a disadvantage. But I think the 3 times a year testing really helps us to understand whether or not there are cycles in the learning process that we need to be more relating to more with students. And to be honest with you, I don't know whether students are grasping more earlier in the year than they are later in the year. There's a piece of this that measures a bit of the proficiency, but then there's also a piece that measures the growth.
Right.
And so obviously we're going to be able to see growth as the year goes forward, but are we always going to be able to measure that level of proficiency? And is it going to be higher at the beginning of the year versus later in the year after they've had the benefit of a full year's learning? I don't know that.
Right.
So being able to maybe understand sort of that learning cycle might be helpful as well. So just feedback, just from my perspective after having read through this, I think would be helpful to sort of lift up some of that stuff. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Other comments? Yes.
I think also is and I'm sure you've done some work on this, but that communication to parents, so then they have talking points to go over with their children. And maybe you've done this, but I think I'm still hearing parents don't understand it.
Right.
I think if you have that piece as well, it potentially would be more successful, maybe.
Yep, and that's good feedback and something we've heard repeatedly from teachers and parents. And so our year 1 goal was the logistics of the test and to get the test launched and all of the things that go along with that. Our year 2 goals, so coming into next year, will be how to help teachers and parents interpret the results. And so we have a series of trainings planned to support that as well. So you're absolutely right.
I do like Connie's suggestion of figuring out how you tie it to the grading.
I think that's the only way you're gonna have.
Yeah, and especially given the way you've described the test, the better they do, the longer it takes.
Yep. Yep.
So, again, maybe adding
We'll have to think
some
about that.
incentives around that and tying it to something bigger than just that point in time may have some validity as well. So, Tom, do you have any other thoughts before we move?
No, I missed the boat on the narrative piece. I thought we changed how the content of what we reported out on the next steps, but I obviously missed the message of the format that you all wanted, so I will fix that for the next time around.
Any other comments? Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on our agenda is item number D3, Monitoring Report on Males of Color, Part 2. I would ask the superintendent to introduce this item.
There wasn't action to be taken.
I'm sorry. Do I have to take action? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Good discussion.
Ask a question.
Yes. So,
It shouldn't be
let me
action.
do this.
Do you see that, though? It does say action on the agenda.
Yeah. So this is the last of the, right?
Algebra.
On algebra.
Color was no action.
Is part 2.
The males of color is the same thing, or the algebra
Yeah.
one's the same thing. We've already reported out on, we've already had our
Right.
math monitoring reports.
Let me look at the schedule.
Do we have it?
Hold on. Point of personal privilege. Where's the,
I thought that since there wasn't a policy specific to ninth grade algebra,
On the
I thought that
schedule.
these were
Okay.
just like the males of color and the preschool and the elementary reading, because
okay, here we go.
monitoring reports on all those areas
It's the current one.
that were broader.
So, part 1,
So this is part of the no specific
part
policy. on
3.
I thought this was part of the no specific policy on
This
algebra.
part of the no specific, okay.
Because, you know, we've done
I
the
don't-
mathematics monitoring report
Already?
as typical. and these
Okay.
were in addition to.
Okay,
That
so
was
this is
my,
sort of a
that was my
subset of the larger.
interpretation. Yeah, that's what.
All right,
that's-
you know what, this
that's
is what
I-
we're gonna do. We're gonna check ourselves. If for whatever reason,
wait.
this is an
Next
item
time.
that we
Vote
need to
next.
take action on, we
Later.
can take action at a subsequent meeting. So we will go back and confirm whether or not this is an item that requires action or it's part of it's a subset of a larger report. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine.
I apologize for
And maybe
not
do,
thinking that through.
would this be a time to get the overview that we, you know, a
Oh,
narrative?
if
The
we bring it
narrative,
back?
if we need to act on it,
Right,
having the
Otherwise, next
narrative
time.
would be
Sure.
helpful.
Okay.
Yes.
as a add-on to the
Yes.
report.
Okay, so we will, Cindy and I will consult on this during agenda planning tomorrow, and if it requires additional action, we will bring it back at the next meeting.
Okay.
Great, thanks, everyone, sorry for that. All right, the next item on our agenda is item number D3, Monitoring Report, Males of Color, Part 2. Did I already ask you to introduce the item?
Yeah,
But we hadn't gotten to that
but we
yet,
didn't get
right?
that far. I didn't
Okay,
move
good.
fast enough. So as part of the special series of 4 different reports, the preschool, elementary reading, algebra, and males of color, this is the final in the males of color series. You may recall that, I don't remember now if it was the last meeting or the meeting before, we gave a pretty broad presentation on equity and how we really feel like this is the vehicle for looking at how we're doing with equity, in that we can't look at males of color in a meaningful way without comparing to the other groups. And so we do get a pretty holistic, not complete, but a pretty holistic look at equity. So we had proposed some changes to the data that we consider in the males of color report, partly because of the larger team's work on equity over the course of the year and trying to get more specific about what our action planning looks like, and partly in response to the board's feedback from the first Males of Color report. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mary and Matt.
Great, thank you. And just for the board's information, we will not be taking action on this item. However, we will make sure that the record shows that we're receiving and filing. So, thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Glad you get to see me.
So are we.
Absolutely.
Thought we'd start off like that. I do want to send regrets from my counterpart, Brenda. She's got a personal matter that she's attending to. So tonight, I have Mary Grinstead and Jake Troja here with me to help answer any questions that I may not completely answer. And with that being said, we'll jump into a significant amount of data, as you see. And the reason for that is actually because we think it takes these KPIs to paint a holistic picture of our Males of Color report, and then we'll be able to drill down in these a little bit more so as we talk more about developing a policy around this particular monitoring report. So we'll just jump right in. How about that? The other thing that I would, I guess, like to begin by saying is I'm going to be a little bit out of character tonight, meaning that I'm going to try to stick to the script, knowing that there's a lot of KPIs for us to, and data for us to talk through and discuss. And so you will not see me ad lib and move through some things because of an extreme amount of passion to improve areas such as this. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we've got a number of KPIs tonight. I won't take too much of your time to explain the map as it was just done for you actually in our algebra report. Additional KPIs, though, that we will discuss include areas of our conditions for graduation rates, dropout rates, behavior events, exclusionary practices, attendance rates, and percent of students engaged and hopeful on our Gallup poll. And I've got a stuck keyboard. Oh, there we go. Now we're rolling. So there's about 15 key indicators here. And we're stuck again. There we go. We'd like to begin by providing a district-wide response to this data. I'm not going to read this to you completely, but as Tom mentioned before, I think this begins with an equity vision, right? And so as we establish a clear sense of purpose for the equity-driven educational system through the development of an equity vision statement, I think that is key for us to, you got to know where you're going before you know how if you're there or not. In addition to that, we've got an equity plan that has been put together, that's been presented to you in our work session. That's a joint collaborative effort from the Office of Schools and Office of Academics in support of an intentional focus on equity across departments in order to drive the monitoring of the implementation of our collective work. Part of that equity plan is an equity analysis framework that will serve as a tool for decision-making within and across our departments. And part of the skills that we'll develop from leaders to teachers to associates to all employees is the cultural proficiency and the PD that we will use, continue to use to develop individual and collective capacity to be more culturally proficient. Other areas that are district-wide efforts to improve the outcomes for our males of color is our continued implementation of Schools for Rigor. And again, we will embed this instructional model into the district's equity vision. In addition to that, we've got intentional work around school improvement plans, where we will revise school improvement planning template to support the development of our equity-driven goals. Obviously, that is an area where we began the work this school year. We revised it at the end of the school year as we worked with 500 leaders from our school leadership teams around the school leadership plan and how it's an equity-driven plan as opposed to just very, I want to call them random, but efforts to improve instruction in isolated events or isolated cases. If it's not driven under a lens of equity, then we can lose sight of our vision and the opportunity to improve outcomes for males of color. In addition to that, we have a school equity profile that's being developed by Mary and her team that will provide short-term KPI information to our schools so that they can monitor this more as leading indicators as opposed to lagging indicators at the end of the school year or end of the semester. So as we jump into the KPIs, this is the percent of third grade students at or above college and career readiness benchmark trend. The percent of African American males meeting or exceeding the college and career readiness standards increased from 13.2% to 15.58%. In the fall, the disproportionate gap of achievement between African American males and other males was 28.64 percentage points. In the spring, the gap closed to 25.3%. Our Hispanic males decreased to 23.75% to 21.02%. In the fall, the disproportionate gap of the achievement between Hispanic males and other males was 18.16%. In the spring, the gap grew to 19.86%.
Yeah.
This is this chart, Table 2, shows the percent of sixth grade students at or above college and career readiness benchmark trend. The percent of African American males meeting or exceeding the college and career readiness standards increased from 14.46% to 7.59%. In the fall, the disproportionate gap of achievement between African American males and other males was 28.98%. In the spring, the gap closed to 25.27%. The percent of Hispanic males meeting or exceeding the college and career readiness benchmarks decreased from 24.92% to 24.6%. In the fall, the disproportionate gap of achievement between Hispanic males and other males was 18.62%, and that gap remained relatively the same at 18.26 percentage points in the spring. This Table 3 represents the percent of ninth grade students at or above college and career readiness benchmark. The percent of African American males meeting or exceeding the college and career readiness standards decreased from 25.44% to 18.38%. In the fall, the disproportionate gap of achievement between African American males and other males was 25.93%. In the spring, this gap grew slightly to 26%. The percent of Hispanic males meeting or exceeding the college and career readiness standards benchmark decreased from 33.2% to 30.16% in the fall, or in the spring. In the fall, the disproportionate gap of achievement between Hispanic males and other males was 18.17 percentage points. In the spring, the gap closed to 14.3%. That's a celebration. Table 4 represents the percent of third grade students meeting fall to spring projected growth targets. The percent of African American males meeting fall to spring projected growth targets was 38.1% in comparison to the 50.1% of other males meeting fall to spring projected growth targets. This is a disproportionate gap of 12%. The percent of Hispanic males meeting fall to spring projected growth targets was 41.8% in comparison to the 50.15% of other males meeting fall to spring projected growth targets. This is a disproportionate gap of 8.31%. Table 5 represents the percent of sixth grade students meeting fall to spring projected growth targets. The percent of African American males meeting fall to spring projected growth targets was 48.96% in the fall, in comparison to the 53.27% of other males meeting fall to spring projected growth targets. This is a disproportionate gap of 4.29%. The percent of Hispanic males meeting fall to spring projected growth targets was 43.49% in comparison to the 53.27% of other males meeting fall to spring projected growth targets. This is a disproportionate gap of approximately 10 percentage points. The percent of ninth grade students meeting fall to spring projected growth targets is represented in Table 6. The percent of African American males meeting fall to spring projected growth targets was 46.48% in comparison to the 49.36% of other males meeting fall to spring projected growth targets. This is a disproportionate gap of 2.88%. The percent of Hispanic males meeting fall to spring projected growth targets was 45.37% in comparison to the 49.36% of other males meeting fall to spring projected growth targets. This is approximately a 4% gap. Table 7 represents the percent of third grade students at or above college and career readiness benchmark trend. The percent of African American males meeting or exceeding the college and career readiness standards increased from 11.45% to 12.88% from the fall to the spring. In the fall, the disproportionate gap of achievement between African American males and other males was 31.41 percentage points. In the spring, the gap closed to 25.83 percentage points. Our Hispanic males decreased from 25.15% to 23.58%. In the fall, the disproportionate gap of achievement between Hispanic males and other males was 17.71%. In the spring, the gap did close to 15.13%. The percent of sixth grade students at or above college and career readiness benchmark. The percent of African American males meeting or exceeding the college and career readiness standards decreased from 9.36% to 7.55%. In the fall, the disproportionate gap of achievement between African American males and other males was 20 percentage points. In the spring, the gap closed to 26.16%. Our Hispanic males increased from 14% to 18%. In the fall, the disproportionate gap of achievement between Hispanic males and other males was 15.41%. In the spring, the gap remained relatively the same at 15%. Table 9 represents the percent of ninth grade students at or above college and career readiness benchmark. The percent of African-American males meeting or exceeding the college and career readiness standards decreased from 7.14% to 6.44%. In the fall, the disproportionate gap of achievement between African-American males and other males was 18%. In the spring, the gap widened to 19%. Our Hispanic males decreased from 11.72% to 10.53%. In the fall, the disproportionate gap of achievement between Hispanic males and other males was 13.5%. In the spring, the gap grew to 15%. Table 10 represents the percent of third grade students meeting fall to spring projected growth targets. The percent of African-American males meeting fall to spring projected growth targets was 43.4% in comparison to the 47.69% of other males meeting fall to spring projected growth targets. This is a disproportionate gap of 4.29%. The percent of Hispanic males meeting fall to spring projected growth targets was 41.42% in comparison to the 47.6% of other males. This is a disproportionate gap of 6.27%. Table 11 represents the percent of sixth grade students meeting fall to spring projected growth targets. The percent of African-American males meeting fall to spring projected growth targets was 46.48%. 43.55% in comparison to the 53.38% of other males meeting fall to spring projected growth targets. This is a disproportionate gap of approximately 10%. The percent of Hispanic males meeting fall to spring projected growth targets was 47% in comparison to the 53% of other males. Again, representing a disproportionate gap of approximately a little over 6%. Table 12 represents the percent of ninth grade students meeting fall to spring projected growth targets. The percent of African-American males meeting fall to spring projected growth targets was 36.67% in comparison to the 47.6% of other males. This is a disproportionate gap of a little over 10%. The percent of Hispanic males meeting fall to spring projected growth targets was 41.23% in comparison to the 47.6% of other males. This is a disproportionate gap of 6.37%. Table 13 represents English 1. Ninth grade students, the percent of students completing English 1 with a C or higher by the end of the ninth grade trend. The percent of African-American males completing English 1 with a C or higher by the end of ninth grade is 37.11% in comparison to 63.13% of other males completing English 1 with a C or higher by the end of their ninth grade. This is a disproportionate gap of 26% in 2017 and a decrease of 14.25% from the 2016 rate. The percent of Hispanic males completing English 1 with a C or higher by the end of the ninth grade is 43.71% in comparison to the 63.13% of other males. This is a disproportionate gap of 19.42%. Table 14 represents Algebra 1 and the percent of students completing Algebra 1 with a C or higher by the end of the ninth grade trend. Percent of African-American males completing Algebra 1 with a C or higher by the end of the ninth grade is 24.51% in comparison to 54.37% of other males completing Algebra 1 with a C or higher. This is a disproportionate gap of 29.86%. The Hispanic males completing English 1, Algebra 1 with a C or higher by the end of their ninth grade is 36.6% in comparison to the 54.37% of other males. This is a disproportionate gap of 17.7%. Table 15 represents the percent of students earning a 3 or higher on the AP exam. The percent of African-American males earning a 3 or higher in AP exams is 1.94% in comparison to the 5.5% of other males. This is disproportionate gap of 3.56%. The percent of Hispanic males earning a 3 or higher is 3.42% in comparison to the 5.5% of other males. Again, representing another disproportionate gap of 2.08%. We broke our response to the data up into 3 different buckets. As we talked about, this is what we refer to as the learning bucket, and as it reflects all the academic achievement and the KPIs that we just reviewed. So this will be a good time as we go through these to stop for questions here before we move on to the other buckets. The response to this is that we're going to have to continue to implement the Schools for Rigor process, the model of instruction of reducing the achievement gap down from lagging semester, year-long data, and working to close the daily gap that exists in learning with a standards-based system and looking at our standards-based PLCs, which is what the instructional model that the Schools for Rigor brings. It absolutely is about closing gaps during the day, during the lesson, before students leave the classroom. That's a major implementation project for us, as we had 6 schools involved in this year, and we're scaling that up to 16 more next year. We'll also begin to continue to analyze and look at our advanced placement programming. We'll monitor the males of color data related to the AP course enrollment and look for successful completion. We'll continue to measure the academic progress of MAP. Again, we spoke even earlier in the algebra report regarding the implementation dip that possibly exists and the fidelity of it being taken seriously. How are we communicating that and how are we messaging that? We'll have to continue to do that because a lot of this data represents the MAP data. And then, of course, all schools will continue to use and work on a structure for PLCs to examine data by subgroups. That's the next iteration of our PLCs as we look to advance our PLCs in daily standards-based practices, but also looking at subgroups within that daily practice. Right now, many of our PLCs across the district, and there's some exceptions to this, we break down subpopulations on after 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or a 6 weeks basis, not a daily basis in our PLCs. And we have to move to that in order to close the daily gap. That's a much heavier lift than the way I'm describing it. Why don't I stop there for a second, because that was a lot of achievement data.
Questions from the board? Yes, Natasha.
Just generally speaking, but with a specific example, like Table 9, the projection for 2017, 2018 was 12.54% of the 9th grade. African-American males will meet benchmark in spring of 2018. I mean, that's a pretty, we knew going into this, the numbers weren't going to be pretty. We knew that. That's why it was so important that we did this. So it's not meant to be like, freaking out or anything, but is there like a specific path when you see numbers projection being so low in addition to the response to the data, or is the response to the data just kind of blanketed?
Well, if I think I understand your question correctly.
I'm not even sure if I know what I'm asking.
So let me offer a thought, I guess. Yes, the data is absolutely alarming, and it's crisis mode.
Right.
The benefit of a report specific and intentional to this highlights and identifies crisis mode. And it's not enough just to have crisis mode in this room. We got to have crisis mode district-wide. All departments have to have crisis mode. The next thing that I would throw out, because it begins with an awareness, and it begins with an understanding that this is a significant gap, and we have a long road ahead of us. It can be tackled, and we can make some major gains, but we all have to be on board with this, and we all have to recognize that the gaps that exist are very real, and they're in our district, and they're in our classrooms. The second part of that is that we have to get to a point as leaders where we are supporting daily instruction to the tune of we're closing gaps within lessons. That means a change in practices, how we support teachers. I'll give you a perfect example of this. What used to be within the last school year, and still exists to some degree, when you provide coaching and feedback and support to a teacher, you would enter to a classroom, conduct your observation, wait possibly at best till the end of the day, or the next day to catch the teacher in their free time and an opportunity where they have, not all the teachers, they don't have a lot of free time, and a moment where they can meet with you, where they don't have kids in their classrooms, in order to shape and shift instruction to have impact. That was best case scenario. That's not enough, because we allowed a gap to exist, not because the teacher's trying to, because it's there. It was there when she entered into the room or when he entered into the room. We got to do coaching on the spot in the moment so that we could shift instruction, because it's 4 set of eyes versus 2 set of eyes in order to see where this is taking place in a classroom, where the gaps exist. If we can shift instruction and coaching in the moment to adapt and adjust, we close the gaps daily as opposed to allowing it to persist and grow. And then we create more tier 2 interventions and then tier 3 interventions, and we continue that effect. That's a heavy lift, and that's actually not a practice. There's no prep programs in leadership that talk about that. There's no leadership prep programs that prepare teachers for having folks in their classroom daily to give coaching on the spot to adjust and adapt instruction right then and there for students, because that's evidence of students learning. I know you were going to say something, but I was going to add one more thing to that. Part of that, in addition to that, which is a critical component of Schools for Rigor, is ensuring that there's target task alignment, that the task that students are engaged in is at the right cognitively complex level of the standard, which is the target, broken down. But and we got to have that. A lot of times, and there's not a lot of prep programs that prepare teachers for that. We do a lot, the traditional methodology of teaching and leading is that we spend a lot of time on the dynamics of the teacher versus the dynamic of the task that students are engaged in, and is it the right rigor of that's aligned to the standard. At a minimum, if we can get it above the standard, great, that's what we need to be doing. But at a minimum, it's got to be aligned to the taxonomy of the standard. And those are things that have not been a part of the educational system ever. None of us in this room went through programs like that, and we're developing that in-house through partnerships with ISU, with LSI, and our Schools for Rigor work. And we have pockets of it, of really good stuff happening all over the district, but doing that in a very cohesive and intentional manner so that it works as a system is the lift that we have to take. That just gave you a whole lot.
Connie? Yeah.
Rigor, I guess. Well, we have, I know that we're just finished in the first year. Has anybody been able to put together the numbers to see on our numbers, like in the Schools of Rigor, when you say daily interventions, are those numbers better for the African-American children than the Hispanic children?
Some of that's still coming in. Some of it, yes.
Yeah.
Some of it is.
At what
some of it's
point-
not.
Yeah, I was going to just say, at what point will we see more information on that, or is 1 year enough?
I don't know that it's enough because it's still a very small sample size, but as we have data, we can certainly have work sessions or bring that to you if that's something that you would like to see as that progress continues. But it's not a blanket yes to that answer, but there are some answers that are absolutely yes in a very significant way thus far. And
Yeah, we've looked at a lot of it. We really didn't expect to see a significant shift from the Schools for Rigor until their second year. In some regard, and we haven't looked at all the data yet. We're actually seeing more movement than we thought we might in those schools. We'd be happy to do that. We'd like a little more time to
I know it'd be early,
peel
but
it
just
down
a
to make
touch
sure that we're
point.
making legitimate comparisons. But yeah, I think it would be very, very instructive to share that.
Kind of interesting to see those schools versus the other schools,
Yeah,
even after the first year.
right.
Other questions? Ms. Ellsburn?
So, less of a question, more of a comment, just in case the burr wasn't nestled far enough under the saddle. When you talk about daily instruction, just want to remind you of the block scheduling discussion that we had last time around, and just the hope that as a systems issue, that there might be a little
More nudge.
toward finding that resolution.
absolutely.
Ms. Anderson?
Oops, sorry. I agree with Cindy as well and Connie earlier. I think that might be something that would help, and I appreciate the hard work that everyone is putting forth. They're not the best numbers. I just hope that also you're really supporting the staff, and it sounds like you are. It just seems like a lot of pressure. I mean, and I hope, I'm not expecting like huge gains, but just, little by little, and then hopefully we'll get there, right?
Well, yeah, and I'll add to that, and we'll see it here in the data as we move forward, but Connie, I want to tie your question about Schools for Rigor and the idea that where we're seeing the most gains within our Schools for Rigor themselves, within the 6, are the schools that have conditions in some of these indicators where they're the thriving and the belonging buckets, where they got significant gains there, because you got to have the conditions and the sense of belonging to impact thriving, and then thriving impacts your academics, your learning buckets. And so, and there's we'll get into that a little bit more deeply as we move forward with the monitoring report, but that is the trend that we're looking at in these Schools for Rigor specifically, as they have the conditions for rigorous learning prevalent in their building. They are making more gains quicker than everybody else because of the conditions.
Thank you, Levi.
I have a 16-month-old, so.
Have one little
Right.
teeny bit
And
more.
we go to bed quickie at my house.
Yes, Ms. Anderson?
I know I just said this earlier, but I do know environment is key. And if the teachers are able to build relationships by going to a block schedule or something, if that's possible at all, I mean, I think that when I went to school, it was like that, and I knew my teachers, and you do build those relationships, which goes a long way with accountability and learning, and I don't know. So I don't know if that would work, but I know that the more you see your students on a daily basis, maybe the better the outcome could be.
Other board questions? Okay, next part of the report.
So I'm going to jump to table 16. My page is out of order. Table 16 represents the 4-year graduation cohort rate. The percent of African American males graduating 4 years in 2016 decreased from 77% to 75%. This represents a disproportionate gap of 5% when compared to the 80% graduation rate of other males. The percent of Hispanic males graduating in 4 years is 75.2%, as an increase of 6.2% from 2015. The 75.2% graduation rate of Hispanic males is still below the 80% rate of our other male graduation rate. Table 17 represents the 5-year cohort graduation rate. The percent of African American males graduating 5 years in 2016 increased from 80.1% to 86.3% and exceeds the graduation rate of other males by almost 6%. The percent of Hispanic males graduating in 5 years is 78.3% and is an increase of 3.4% from the 2015 rate. The 78.3% graduation rate of Hispanic males is still below the 80.7% graduation rate of other males. Still lots to celebrate there. Table 18 represents the dropout rate. The dropout rate of African American males in 2016 decreased from 5% to 4.8%. The dropout rate of Hispanic males increased from 5.2% to 6%. Table 19 represents grades K through 5, the percent of students having 0 to 1 office referrals. The percent of African American males having 0 to 1 office referrals in 2017 was 61.93% in comparison to the 81.64% of other males receiving 0 to 1 office referrals. This is a disproportionate gap of 19.71%. The percent of Hispanic males receiving 0 to 1 office referrals in 2017 was 86.44%. This percent exceeds that of other males by 4.8%. Just a reminder that this is a percentage in the 0 to 1 of office referrals that we want to go up. is just a different way of looking at it, but we want that number to skyrocket. We want the 0%, the number of students receiving 0 office referrals to climb incredibly high. Table 20 represents the grades 6 through 8, percent of students having 0 to 1 office referrals. The percent of African-American males having 0 to 1 office referrals in 2017 was 50.41% in comparison to the 77.35% of other males. This is a disproportionate gap of 26.94%. The percent of Hispanic males receiving 0 to 1 office referrals in 2017 was 78.26%. This percent slightly exceeds that of other males by 0.91%. Table 21 represents the grades 9 through 12, the percent of students having 0 to 1 office referrals. The percent of African-American males having 0 to 1 office referrals in 2017 was 71.92% in comparison to the 88.05% of other males receiving 0 to 1 office referrals. This is a disproportionate gap of 16.13%. The percent of Hispanic males receiving 0 to 1 office referrals in 2017 was 86.75%. This percent is disproportionate to that of other males who received 88.05% of office referrals. Table 22 represents grades K through 5, out-of-school suspension days, and the disproportionality trend. This is also a different way of looking at this. We've had the discussion here at the board table when we look at the out-of-school suspension days and the rate, at the disproportionate rate. And the discussion, both at the table and in buildings as we conduct walks, is when if you have 100 suspension days, and 40 of those days are representative of our African-American male students, for example. And then you decrease that number down to 10, and 6 of them are African-American male students. Is one better than the other? Because that data, in terms of 40% there, can be sliced and diced in a number of different ways, and we just didn't feel like that was a really accurate way of us looking at that data and a consistent way of looking at it. We feel like looking at it in this manner, and so I'll kind of read through this a little bit, but is a more consistent and accurate way and gives us a much clearer picture of what's taking place in our schools when it comes to suspension of our students. This graph displays the disproportionate out-of-school suspension days messed up on my notes. And it's determined by the number of out-of-school suspension days for kindergarten through 5th grade students divided by the count of kindergarten through 5th grade students, or their average daily attendance. The African-American male subgroup has made the greatest gains in reducing the out-of-school suspension disproportionality by decreasing 0.0275 from 0.1681 days per student in 25-16 to 0.14 days per student in 2016-2017. So this is where I'm going to ask Mary, our statistics and data analyst, to explain those numbers.
Okay, so if you look at this table, if we're looking at the current year, so among all students, as a district in elementary, we had 0.04 days, so a 20th of a day of out-of-school suspension per student in the building among all students. So your average student spent 20% of a day out of the building. So, among African American males, that is 0.14. So among all those African American males in elementary school, on average, each student spent 15% of a day out of the building because they were suspended. So that's about 3 times the rate of all students. If I may skip ahead, it's a little easier to interpret when the numbers get a little bigger. So for middle school, when we're looking at the current year, African American males, so middle school, the number of suspensions given, we suspended each African American, if we were divvying them up all equally, we suspended each African American male 1/3 of a school day this past year.
On average.
Yeah, that's, they didn't all get suspended, but if we were to average that all out, so that's still about 3 times the rate of all students. So it's a rate, it's a days per student. So if Matt got suspended 10 days and I didn't get any because I'm a much, well-behaved, more well-behaved person than Matt, our rate between the two of us would be 5. So between the two of us, we got 5.
So, go ahead.
Pardon me. We used to, could you for one final time explain to me why we changed how we're looking at this data and how we used to look at it compared to how we're looking at it now?
Sure. I'll use some different numbers, but maybe the same example. How about that? If we, in the past, what we would do is we would look at the number of suspension days, or even unique students, right, individual students. If I suspended in my building 100 students, and of those 100, 25 of them were African-American male students, and we have that rate of suspension for African-American males. The next school year, I suspend 50 students. Of the 50, 5 of them are African-American males. And what we would do is we would say, all right, did you decrease your disproportionality? Because sometimes in those cases, the disproportionality rate actually went up, even though the number of suspensions dropped drastically and dramatically. And so we were never getting a true picture of what was taking place because we would focus on the rate as opposed to the number in addition to the rate, because both of them tell a story.
Right.
Right? And so we could reduce numbers drastically and still have a rate go up, a disproportionality rate.
Right.
This gives us more of an accurate and a consistent look of the number of students in any subpopulation in comparison to the number of students in the days in attendance in school. Mm-hmm. And what is the average student represented in that subpopulation? What's the average percent of the day that they are not in school because of suspension on an average? That gives us a cleaner look at it at the district level. At the building level, they still look at unique individual students.
Okay. Thank you.
That help?
Stronger comparative base.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Using the same indicator in Table 24, grades 9 through 12, out-of-school suspensions. In grades 9 through 12, the Hispanic male subgroup made the greatest gains in reducing the out-of-school suspension disproportionately by decreasing 0.0663 days per student from 0.1625 days per student in 2015-2016 to the 0.0753 days per student in 2016-2017. So both in K-5 and 6-8, our African-American male students made the greatest gain in reductions in the average part of their day being suspended. In grades 9 through 12, it was our Hispanic males we had the greatest gains in. All right, Table 25. Expulsions and disproportionality trend. I know that we all know that the percentage is 0, but that's still significant, and I want to continue to highlight and lift that up because that's not easy, and that takes the work of a lot of folks. So I'm very proud of that. Table 26 represents the K-5% of students chronically absent. The chronically absent rate for African-American males, kindergarten through 5th grade, has increased by 0.93% from 14.08% in 2014-2015 to the 15.01% in 2016-2017. The disproportionate gap of African-American males and other males increased from 5.76% in 2016-2017 to 3.77%. From 3.77% in 2014-2015. The chronically absent rate for Hispanic males in kindergarten through fifth grade students has increased by 1.18% from the 2014-2015 school year to 9.73% in the 2016-2017 school year. Table 27 represents, again, the chronically absenteeism in grades 6 through 8. The chronically absent rate for 6th grade through 8th grade students has increased by 1.63% for all students to 16.7% in 2015-2016. The 6th through 8th grade African American male subgroup made gains in reducing the percent of students chronically absent by decreasing 1.09% from 20.55% in 2015-2016 to 19.46% in 2016-2017. In Table 28, it's grades 9 through 12, the percent of students chronically absent. Chronically absent rate for African American males 9 through 12 grade students has decreased by 0.57% from 2015-2016 and 1.85% from the 2014-2015 school year. The disproportionate gap between African American males and other males increased to 17.09 percentage points in 2016-2017 from the 16.85% in 2014-2015. The chronically absent rate for Hispanic males 9 through 12 students has increased by 2.76% from the 2015-2016 school year. The disproportionate gap between Hispanic males and other males increased from 15.92% in 2016-2017 from 14.12% in 2014-2015. And so as we look at the response to the data, and again, that bucket of thriving, we will look at continue to increase the number of males of color participating in extracurricular activities. We've had a lot of success there at our middle schools and our high schools, particularly at our middle schools. And we've got some data that correlates where students that are more actively involved in activities have not only a higher attendance rate, but they're receiving fewer referral rates. We'll continue to expand our males of color access to health and safety services through our community partnerships in order to provide students responding to severe trauma. We will look at continuing to add school-based therapists to each school through our categorical funding. Continue to focus on restorative practice and equity for behavior, for our behavior team, and we'll add an additional district-level climate coordinator through categorical funds in order to help support and coordinate the work at the building level. And of course, we will continue to intensify supports for chronically absent students via our community-based partnerships. Additionally, we'll continue to implement a universal attendance intervention that includes aligning the services of counselors, success case managers, school nurses, school-based therapy, student assistance program, truancy court, AmeriCorps, et cetera. District-level at-risk coordinators are assigned to provide support to identify root cause at school level and help support the absence and intensify supports for decreasing chronic absenteeism. Community school coordinators will involve community partners in providing support with chronic absenteeism and work directly with families. Our parents will be provided information regarding the attendance policy and the procedures. That's a particular area I think we make a lot of assumptions that folks understand our procedures and our policies in terms of attendance. And we got to do a better job of communicating that and messaging out what the actual policies and procedures are at our school and be consistent in multiple language with that. All schools have an attendance team that reviews all data, including our males of color who miss 5 or more days of out of school, excused or unexcused, to identify students in needs of supportive services. The attendance team, consisting of support staff and administration, will review which support staff is the most appropriate fit based on the students' and families' needs. I do have Jake here to my left that could fill in a number of gaps, anything I left out in terms of the universal attendance intervention and to capture it, and then you can fill in. It's a number of efforts, but all streamlined, and recognizing that chronic absenteeism is actually a root cause of students not performing academically if they're not in school via our own virtue, things that we've done in terms of games, activities, in addition to just being absent for illness, things like that. Again, because chronic absenteeism, there is no reason that is acceptable. If you're absent from class, we've missed instruction, we've missed opportunities to learn. What did I miss?
You didn't miss much. Nice job. I just want to clarify the second bullet there, district level at-risk coordinator assigned to provide support. So we've rearranged a lot of staffing on our team, and we identified this as a need earlier in the year and just rearranged our staff to have a sole one team member to really focus on the attendance initiative district-wide, including, how are we attacking chronic absenteeism. So we've eliminated and dispersed out how we're going to monitor some of the programming we're doing, but we've solely assigned one person to be in charge at the district level, which is a change from practice. So I just wanted to highlight that so that now we have somebody that really is owning that beast of attendance. And I can clarify any questions you may have with the data or.
I think it's illustrative to think about the overall daily attendance rate, because the average daily attendance rate for our students, it varies a little bit from level to level, but it's right at 95% or better. And so if you look at, especially at high school, it's a very high percentage that qualify as chronically absent. It means that the other, in the high school case, the other 63% are barely missing anything. So there's a real, we have a real opportunity here to drill down to some root causes that's negatively impacting attendance, and seeing if there's anything that we're doing as a system inadvertently to drive that number up. And then I also think that there's a role for the greater community to help us emphasize the importance of actually being at school, because we have a pretty amazing instructional staff, but if they don't have access to the students, they're not able to provide the service. So getting that message out more strongly and more forcefully.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, please.
Well, in looking at some of the data, some things are catch-22, right? And meaning that as we drive up the numbers of students participating in activities, we also drive up possibly the number of students chronically absent because of those activities. Even though they're scheduled after school, sometimes there's travel time where you got to leave school early. And so there is that, we're analyzing that data to see, are we actually causing some of this chronic absenteeism to escalate, to increase, based on the fact that we're trying to get more kids involved in activities, which requires time sometimes out of class. And looking at our systems and our structures, can we push games back? Can we push activities back? Can we push events to a different part of the day? And so therein is that idea and the need to have community partnerships, because we want to have kids with us as long as possible so that we can maximize the day both in class and out of class. So there is there's that nuance that we have to continue to balance and look at, because one actually might be causing another. An increase in activities could be causing an increase in chronic absenteeism as well.
You want to go first?
Yes.
So with the activities, I don't know if this is for all activities, but I thought the kids had to have a certain grade in order to participate. And then also, I would have thought they would look at maybe their attendance outside of the activity. So if they're like missing a lot of classes that don't have anything to do with tennis or whatever, I don't know, whatever activity, maybe the coach says you can't. I don't know.
I can answer that. Traditionally, yes. What we're finding, though, is particularly as we look at students being engaged in their passion, is that actually might be the one thing that's bringing them to school, as opposed to, they're coming for that. Wow. And while we have them in this particular passion, whether, speech and debate, a lot of my students, speech and debate was what they came for.
So
while they're there, can we talk them into going to algebra, right? Can we talk them into going to English 1?
I get that, but then I know that is happening. So is it like different rules for different activities, or?
Well, we leave it up to the sponsor to manage that. However, there is a universal expectation that we don't exclude kids based on the idea that if they're missing class, could they not participate? So is that going to be the one thing that drives them to drop out, things like that? So we weigh those cases individually, but we weigh them very heavily. What we don't do is move towards creating what I would consider to be barriers for kids to participate, not only in extracurricular, but also in class.
No, I totally get that.
Right, yeah. And you're saying the same thing I think I am, but in terms of just looking at it through a different lens.
Yeah, no, I hate that, I mean, when kids can't participate, but then because of their grade or whatever, because it might be the one thing that's getting them to school, but then they also have to do the work, so
Sure.
it's a catch
It is.
22, so.
Deanna?
Thank you. Yeah, I want to first celebrate that we've continued to have 0 expulsions because we know that we were seeing large amounts of disproportionality among students of color that were being expelled. And so I recognize that's a huge achievement. That's something I'm super excited about. And it's really cool to see in this report. So you should be really proud of that as a team because I know that's a big deal.
Thank you.
I'm wondering when we go back and look at some of our behavior data on pages, I think we're starting on page 26. We're looking at table 19, table 20, table 21, table 22, table 23. So are there particular trends? Have we broken down those referrals for behavior and those out-of-school suspensions? And are there trends that we're seeing, particularly with our Latino students, with our African-American students, that they are being referred for or suspended for?
I haven't quite broken down that far this year, but I know the 2 top referral rate reasons that are level 2 or higher are minor defiance and out of bounds. Those make up the majority of level 2 or higher referrals. How they are disproportionate among race, I'm not quite sure exactly yet. We just started working on that at the middle school level this week. But I know those are the 2 categories that we see the most or the highest referral categories in.
I bring that up because I know we've had this conversation at the table before, and I feel like this is a catch-22 in several ways, right? And it may speak to how we're approaching our equity work, and I don't know what the struggle looks like in our schools. Maybe you can share more. But we do know, just like in terms of a disorderly conduct, right, that those top 2 referrals are highly subjective.
For sure.
Means, right? Disrespect, those sorts of things. So you said it was...
So minor defiance, which is subjective, and then the next one was out of bounds, which is leaving class without permission.
Okay.
Basically, we're showing up extremely late. So those are the 2 categories, and the difference between those categories is pretty large. It's about, I think the top one is a ballpark. It makes up like 45% of all referrals, level 2 or higher, and then the next category down that I mentioned was probably 10%. So really it's the major defiance area that we need to break down and figure out where that's coming from. And
right.
And
if it's because that's another reason for out of school absenteeism, right? If you're being referred to the office or being suspended for those very highly subjective areas. Now, I know the flip side of this conversation is behavior, right? And so I know being out in the community and being at a lot of community meetings and meeting with DMEA members and all of that, we also are hearing teachers that are frustrated with behaviors that are happening in the classrooms. And even hearing things along the lines where maybe it's implied but not stated, where the message teachers are feeling is, well, we can't refer any more Black students or we can't refer any more Latino students because then our numbers are going to be driven up and it's not going to look well. And so I think I touched on this when we were in our work session talking about our equity plan, but I think that's something that, is very important to this particular discussion. Because just like, which I agree, our students need to be in class, and there does need to be a push about the significance and the importance of being in class, but the other piece of this is we're still looking at rates that are pretty significant, and it's just like you said, Matt, we're in crisis mode, right? So knowing that there is a level of responsibility that's on our students, right, for their behavior, absolutely, but also are there institutional policies and practices that we have in place that are also leading to out-of-school class time for particular groups of students, and I don't necessarily see that outlined here, and I think that data would be helpful, particularly if we're looking at success of our males of color in the classroom, to understand that. And I know we've had that data in the past. I think that could be helpful moving forward.
What, I'm sorry, say that data again, that you wanted?
Looking at specifically at those referral data, out-of-school suspension data, what are those students being referred
Oh,
for?
gotcha.
What are the
Okay.
top 2 categories?
Gotcha.
Are there trends or discrepancies among our students of color in those categories? And then also looking at, so then how it, because that's not what we want either, right? And so, but we don't want people not dealing with disciplinary issues in the classroom because of, worrying that numbers are going to be brought up at the board table and they're going to be dinged at their school, right? So it has to be a tension and a balance, but I think we have to have an honest conversation about it from the board table, and then really look at, I know we had met with, I see some of the team members over here from the, who are working on our equity plan. So then how is that integrated into the work that we're doing in our cultural proficiency work? If there are places that we need to be more transparent, or be more assertive, or be more understanding and flexible, but we have to have that conversation, and because we still see these rates. Yeah, so I appreciate the focus on looking at absenteeism for our students of color, absolutely, but we also have to look at this flip side too, because it's.
Right. Well, and if I may, what I hear you speaking to is the intentionality of our equity work, and specifically the skill of continuing to develop our own cultural proficiency. Because one of the things that I've learned is that as you engage in this conversation and you engage in your own collective understanding of your bias and what you carry with you, if you don't do the work on the front end of that and recognize what are your biases and how you might respond, when the situation happens, you revert back to what you may have done years ago, or what your bias may lead you to do, as opposed to saying, I recognize where I'm at, that this may be a subjective moment, and I may be responding in a manner that's not benefiting that child or the other children in this classroom, or myself as the adult in the hallway, in the cafeteria, in the office, or in the classroom. And so a lot of the work that we're engaging in, and through the work of the team that's sitting there and the folks at the table, but the equity leads at the building, is developing that training so that we have these conversations before situations occur, so that we can be prepared for them, to know that this is an example of a situation that may take place where I used to respond this way and got zero result out of that, in terms of the kid left my classroom, lost instruction, or the kid left my office, we lost days of school because I responded in the office in a manner that was not supportive of the student and his or her root cause situation there, or I just don't understand what's taking place exactly.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think the cultural proficiency work is absolutely integral to any of our Schools for Rotary work that we're doing moving forward. I mean, I don't know about you all. I get emails about like the things that we're talking about at the board table. I get calls. I just met with a parent, and I'm not going to go on that would be unethical, but the things that we're discussing at the board table are happening in our schools. Mm-hmm. And so if we want to create an environment for all of our kids to learn, well, we have to address the whole piece of the puzzle. And I think that, and we have to do it honestly. And if, I know we're continuing to work on this trust between staff and board members and what we're looking for and what we're not, but I do know that that's been a rising concern that I've been hearing from parents in our schools about behavior, or teachers in our schools around behavior. But I'm also like, how are we leading this cultural proficiency work to help give them the tools they need to manage behavior in the classroom, the support they need to manage behavior in the classroom, but also to recognize, just like you said, am I projecting some of my own biases on some of our children in terms of what's respectful, what's not respectful, what's happening in the context of that child in that day in the classroom or not, in terms of why they may be behaving a certain way or whatnot. So I think if I had to sum it up again, I just think that we need to be including that data in terms of, what are students being referred for and what are they being suspended for? Do we see trends of data there? If there, what's our plan to attack that without simply saying this is bad and don't refer kids? Are there supports we could, maybe a better question would be, are you hearing the same thing? Are you hearing the same thing from teachers in schools in terms of behavior?
Sure.
So can I add one thing before you? One of the things that we've talked about at the board table, and one of the things that we've referred to the superintendent, is having an opportunity to have a conversation around discipline and bullying. And I think it's that notion of how we strike that balance between under-referring, over-referring, whatever it is. And so I think that's a way to really sort of sum up where we think
I'm
we
glad
are.
you mentioned that because I was
And-
that was my comment, because we
Yes.
have that slated as an upcoming work session, so.
Thank you, thank you. Sorry, Jake.
No, that's okay. And I think to just kind of highlight, Deanna, we haven't ever said don't write referrals. And the data would suggest that we're writing more referrals than we did last year, and we're writing more referrals than we did the year before that. Not that that means an increase of negative behavior. Also, really what it means to me is I'm actually really excited by these numbers, and I'll kind of explain that here in a second. And as we further break it down, I'm actually even more excited by the underlying trends that I'm seeing with the decrease in the percentage of students that of color receiving referral, and the increase in how that's balancing out. So I'd love to provide that data for you to look at and analyze and what that looks like. But what I mean by that is, no, we're not saying that. We've never said don't write referrals, don't refer black students or brown students. You know, we're not saying that. When I hear that, when I hear the word behavior, I'm wondering what that means and and define that for me. Are we talking about delinquent defiant behavior? Are we talking about behavior that I don't understand? Are we talking about trauma? Are we talking about mental health issues when they come to school? Because when we say behavior, we blanket all things that we see. Right. And so I just have to ask that next question: what are you seeing, and what does that look like? Because I would say that there's several things that lead to that piece, and not to get too deep into that, but we have a decrease in our Medicaid funding that's happening. So therefore, children that need mental health treatment are not receiving that, and they're coming to our schools. And PMIC placements are shorter, so they're coming to us sooner than they would before. There's a lot of factors that are leading to that, trend in what we'd say behavior. But what that means is our schools have to look differently. If they're coming to us, we have to do something different than we did last year, and we know what that is. We know that we have to adapt to that change, and our schools have to look differently. So I'm a little bit excited is not the right term. Encourage that staff and being just removed from building not too long ago, they understand that if we're saying that we're a little bit discomfortable referring this student for this type of behavior, that tells me that there's some thinking and some change going on in what may or may not have occurred in the past. And if there's some discomfort, I think that's where the opportunity, to quote a colleague of ours, lies, is that if we're discomfortable about what the current reality is, then we have to seek a solution to do something different. So I'm excited about that opportunity, and so we have to respond and provide some things. What's different look like? How do we provide just supports to a child that I don't know, what this means when they do the behavior, whatever that is. So I think to blanket with just delinquent defiant isn't the right category, because not all, I would say the majority behavior is not delinquent defiant. It's something that's coming to us, and we're trying to respond to it in a way that makes sense, and we need some help doing that. So the underlying data trends the right way as well. I think Matt, highlighted some of we've continued to decrease out of school suspensions, which leads to a decrease in chronic absenteeism as well. But we've also closed the gap on the disproportionality in out of school suspensions, which I think I want to highlight that at all levels, which is important. And so I would love to share with you the underlying data about how we look at percentage referrals and where they go to students and what that looks like. So I think that would be very telling.
Absolutely. I guess in my mind, right, we have so many of our students who are coming to us with so many barriers that are outside of our control that influence their learning in the classroom. Right? But this category is something that I feel like is very much within our control in terms of how we treat our students once they're in the classroom, how we view them, the hard work, but the necessary work if you're going to teach in an urban school setting, of the work that I believe that we're embarking on. And so I hear you, and I know we're going to speak in very broad terms, that there are more detailed plans that are taking place. You guys provided our equity plan a couple of weeks ago. I'm just, from the platform that I sit at, I need to be able to continue to advocate that this is within our control. There's a lot of things that aren't, but the instruction that our staff are getting, our administrators are getting around the cultural proficiency work, that's very much within our control. Which leads me to a final question around funding, because that's the, also the elephant in the room to support this work that we're doing. How is our state levels of funding going to impact the work that, our responses to the data, which oftentimes we're talking about hiring personnel, we're looking at, is it sustainable? Are we going to be able to sustain this work and the response to the data with the current level of funding that we have?
That's a great question. So, I don't know,
Maybe
team
that, I don't know
Matt.
who, that could be a you question, Tom, that could be.
Well, yeah, so that's an absolutely, that's a question that, for sure Thomas and I are wrestling with daily. Can we sustain the level of support specific to this work? We can, at the expense of something else, so it's a matter of priorities. We can't move forward beyond next year supporting all of our programming the way we are right now. It'll be illegal for us to do that. We'll have the money, we won't have the spending authority. So unless something changes, so if supplemental state aid goes, higher than we think it's going to, that gives us some room. We're going to talk about one thing in the work session that's going to create a little bit of space for us on a temporary fashion to allow us to not have to make reductions in areas that we know we need to continue to support and areas there where we know we're making progress. So yeah, the answer is, I guess, like to quote Bill Good, we can do anything, but we can't do everything. And so in a time of very, very tight funding, it does become all the more a matter of prioritization. But to your point, though, and I think you hit the nail on the head here, one of the things under our control is what kind of support, what kind of instruction, what kind of continuing education, what kind of focus do we want to put on all of our staff regarding cultural proficiency and equitable practices. That's under our control to the extent that we have resources to do it, for sure. So we need to be very clear about what the priorities are and shift the resources so that they're supporting the highest priorities, and let some other things that aren't quite as impactful or as important be diminished a bit.
So can I just make a quick comment? We still have one additional report or work session after this, and we haven't completed this document. So I'm going to encourage us to keep moving, and to the extent that we need to spend more time, we're willing to, but let's just be mindful of where we are on the schedule. It's 8:01. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Table 29 represents the Gallup student poll and percent of students engaged. The Gallup Student Poll is a 24-question survey that measures the engagement, hope, and entrepreneurial aspirations and career financial literacy of students in grades 5 through 12. The Gallup Student Poll includes non-cognitive metrics with links to student success. Engagement is defined as the involvement in, enthusiasm for school. Engagement has decreased by 2% from 49% in the fall of 2015 to 47% in the fall of 2016. African-American males' engagement was 51%, which is 4% higher than that of all students. Hispanic male engagement was 49%, 2% higher than that of all students.
And just one note, the board had requested that this be broken down, and we didn't have the ability to do it last year, so Mary worked directly with Gallup to make sure we could get it broken down for this last iteration, and we'll continue to do that. So that's why you see the asterisk in the subgroup under the 2015 data.
Thank you.
And Table 30 represents the Gallup Student Poll and the percent of students hopeful. Hopeful is defined as the ideas and energy students have for the future. Hopeful has decreased by 2% from 45% in the fall of 2015 to 43% in the fall of 2016 for all students. Percent of African-American males hopeful was 2% higher than that of all students, and percent of Hispanic males hopeful was 1% lower than that of all students. And that's the data slides, and again, just the response to the data in regards to belonging. That will continue to align the work of our community school coordinators with a school improvement plan to embed that work in the school systems. We'll increase the number of community school coordinators through just repurposing of positions. And we'll continue to create additional learning opportunities for families of color through community education. Additionally, when we look at student voice and belonging, we'll continue to create district-wide student council to elevate student voice and district decision-making. Students will engage in a YPAR course, which stands for Youth Participatory Action Research, to examine district equity issues and provide recommendations to district leadership. Students will also engage in talking in class and learn how to advocate for culturally responsive curriculum and instruction. That concludes
Thank you.
this very short monitoring report.
Thank you for that. Additional questions? Comments? Yes.
Comment. On the response to data, the last bullet point is to add students to the DMPS board. And I know I read that in the equity report and that are in your equity plan, and that the intent was to do that in this next year. I'm just going to say that I feel like that's quite aggressive, given this is an election year, given we don't know what that looks like, given we don't know what that means to this group. So I would encourage our board to be more heavily involved in what that does look like and how that would play out.
And actually, I'm glad you raised that, Cindy, because that's not our decision to make. I think that's should be looked at as a possible next step, but that's certainly not something that administration can do. That would be exclusively a decision of the board. Thank you.
Agreed, thanks.
Other comments? Okay. I did have a few, but I'll send them to you under separate cover.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, we will not be taking action on that report, but I do appreciate the staff's time and attention to gathering all of the data and information and creating a really strong framework for us moving forward. So the next item on our agenda is the chair's report. And I did have a statement I was going to read, but in the interest of time, I'll refer everyone to the district's website. Today is World Refugee Day, and I just wanted to really acknowledge the rich diversity of our district and the amazing contributions that our immigrant and refugee students bring, not only to our classrooms, but also to our communities. So I'll refer everyone to the statement that's on the district website that I was going to read tonight and dispense with that. And then also, I just want to lift up, I had the pleasure of going to the 13th annual Our Kids Summer Institute last Monday. And the district was presented with the Legacy Award for 2017, recognizing courageous leadership by providing a collective vision and voice. We honor your unanimous approval of 2 resolutions in support of immigrant and refugee students. And this was presented to the Board of Directors of the Des Moines Independent School District. And I was pleased to represent not only the district, but also the work of this board and also our district in, again, recognizing the importance of immigrant and refugee students and providing safe havens for them within our district. So I will give this to the superintendent, and we can put it in our trophy case or whatever. But congratulations to the board, and really wonderful work. So
Very nice.
that's all that I have to share. Any other board members have items of privilege that you'd like to share? Yes, Cindy.
Yes, just a reminder that on Saturday, we have our How the School Board Works workshop from 9 a.m. to noon here. We have received a number of registrations as of now. There's a chance that the registration may not be active on the website anymore because of some crash or something that happened.
Too many people signing up all at once.
Exactly.
Right.
That was what it was. But for the folks out there to know that you can still sign up. We, perhaps contact Deb Pendleton if you need more information on that, or any one of us, and we'll get you to the right place to make sure your name's on the list.
Right, in this room,
In this room,
9 o'clock, Saturday, the 24th.
correct.
Great, thank you. Anyone else have anything to share? Superintendent's report.
I just have one item of personal privilege. I got a phone call from my niece, who is going to be a junior at UNI next year, my only brother's only daughter. And she said she had a blast from my past she wanted to tell me about. So I didn't have a chance to talk to her until last night. And so I have to say hello to LaWanda Sanders, the mother of Yakira Sanders. LaWanda was the very first parent I met of a DMPS student when I first started at Harding Middle School. It was July of 2008, and LaWanda and Yakaira had just moved to Des Moines from Detroit and landed in the Harding district, and what she had heard about Harding wasn't encouraging to her, and so she called the school and we set up a meeting, and I promised her that we would take good care of Yakaira. And Mary Fitzgerald's out there. She may remember Yakaira from Harding days. She was a handful, but obviously a very bright and intelligent young woman. Anyway, she is now working with my niece, helping to orient new students at UNI. And she finally asked my niece, "So, Kristen, I've been meaning to ask you, do you know a Mr. Ahart in Des Moines?" And she says, "As a matter of fact, I do. It's my Uncle Tom." Anyway, so she shared some very fun memories of Des Moines and what the district did to provide her the opportunities to be where she is now. And I got a couple of pictures of her and my niece on the phone. It was really fun, and it was a nice testament. You don't always hear about some of those projects that we have, but amazing family, amazing mother. LaWanda's amazing, and I wish Jake were here too, because Jake and I got to be very intimate with that family, and she had a great career in Des Moines and is doing very well at UNI. So another Des Moines success story.
Great.
That's all I have.
Good. It's a good story. Good way to end our meeting. So thank you for that, Tom. With no other business, I will adjourn the regular meeting of the board for June 20th, 2017. And we're not going to take a short break. We're going to adjourn and go straight into our work session. How's that?